Well, hi, this is John Sarver with Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. Welcome to our Thursday evening Zoom. We've been doing these since early in when the pandemic started, actually over 2 years ago. And we do have a number of different programs now. The first Thursday is Ann Arbor Solar Stories. Second Thursday is kind of a clean energy seminar, renewable energy seminar, which covers a variety of topics. And then the third Thursday, we have Detroit Solar Stories. And then the fourth, and if there's a fifth Thursday, we kind of reserve for Michigan Solar Stories and other topics of interest. And so, I'm John Sarver, your host, and this is sponsored by the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. We are a membership organization, and I know many of you are members. And if you're not, consider joining GLREA. We need support for our advocacy and educational efforts. And it's easy to do. Just go to our website, www.glrea.org, and you'll see it's pretty easy to kind of join up. I'd like to thank our sponsors. One is the State Eagle Department, Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, McNaughton and McKay, and Iron Ridge Iraqi have sponsored our series of Thursday evening Zooms. And it's my pleasure tonight to have Dan Worth join us from up the Traverse City area. And he's going to talk about a new initiative from Leelanau Energy, which is a nonprofit that has been doing very good work up in that part of the state, the Leelanau Peninsula. And they have an exciting new initiative, Energize Leelanau Challenge, which I think will be of interest to folks because it may be an approach that other communities might want to try to use. I think a lot of communities around the state, certainly where I live, Meridian Township, east of East Lansing, we're always looking for ideas that our communities can do. And so with that, and I've known Dan for a long time, and he's been working in this clean energy field for a long time. Dan, you may want to just briefly mention a few things about your background.
Sure. Well, thank you, John, and all the folks at GLREA. I was on the board for a couple years, and y'all are just doing amazing work, and you've been doing it forever, and you keep doing it really well. So thank you guys. We really appreciate it. I came to Michigan Clean Energy work probably 7-8 years ago and started working at the Groundwork Center Institute up here in Traverse City, and was their clean energy policy specialist for a while, and then took over running the clean energy program. And they did a lot of policy work, also some on the ground stuff, which I'll talk a little bit about today. And then just last year left and have now started working for Leelanau Energy to try to roll out this challenge. And it's just been fun and inspiring, and seeing all the good things going on all around Michigan and Ann Arbor and Royal Oak, and wherever you look, it looks like there's more going on. So it's pretty inspiring to see. I'm going to share my screen now. I do have a PowerPoint, and I don't want to talk at you the whole time, so I'll go relatively quickly through this and hopefully save some good time for a Q&A. But if you got questions, or I'm motoring on way too fast or something, just feel free to wave or stop me or jump in with a question, or drop something in the chat. If I don't notice it right away, I'm happy to get back to it later. But again, thanks for this opportunity. This is just great. All right. Can you all see that? All right, go technology. So Energize Leelanau Challenge launched about a month and a half ago. And as you can see, there are some fun photos. On the left, there's a group of folks, probably all 60 years plus, putting up solar arrays, knocking things out. Leelanau Energy is a very do-it-yourself, make-it-happen kind of group, which I love. On the right there, you see our now County Commissioner, Lois Bailey, who's also been a huge supporter. Many of you know Bailey's up in Sutton's Bay and all the various Bailey things that are there. She's just a force of nature and a great member doing solar tours. And you see that right there in front of Cherry Republic, which I'm sure many of you have a nice spot for as well. And then in the middle, there's me and Joe DeForest, who's the president of Leelanau Energy, and whose brainchild this really is. I see Jane Gale on here and some others. It's a group effort for sure, but this is Joe's wonderful idea. So today I'm going to do three things. The first is just give you a little background on Leelanau Energy. It's a fantastic group that's been doing great work, really innovative work for years. So I'd love to highlight some of that first. The second is talk a little bit about what the Energize Challenge is and sort of where it came from and what this phase one looks like. And then the third part, where I'm really hoping for some active participation, is what's next? What does this lead to? Is this a replicable and scalable idea? Is this something others might want to do? Do any of you know folks up in Leelanau trying to put energy projects together that need a little oomph? So that's very roughly sort of how we'll break it down. So Leelanau Energy, there was just came together, and it was a really interesting group. We've got Skip Pruss up here, who used to be Grand Home's energy person. We've got Dan Scripps, who's on the Public Service Commission. We've got Maeve Trofe, who's the Steelcase renewable purchaser. And just everywhere you look, it seems to be some retired or semi-retired person doing wonderful energy work. And so when I first arrived up here with my family, it was just beautiful to fall into this, what felt like a little Rocky Mountain Institute complete with Amory Lovins and everything. It was just this group that seemed to be able to do just about anything. In 2010, they formalized a little bit, changed the name to Northport Energy Action Task Force with a focus on action. I think this is a group that would sort of educate themselves on things, but at some point they said, let's stop educating and start doing. In 2012, they did a really innovative and creative project. They wanted a wind turbine, which, as many of you know, imagine trying to get one of those up in Leelanau County. It's sort of an uphill battle with the viewscapes and some resistance. But they combined a turbine and 60 kilowatts of solar power, and they put it right next to the wastewater treatment plant. And for those of you that don't know, those are just about the perfect spot because they're always using power. And so you'll feed some back to the grid for sure, but anytime you're producing, pretty much, it's going to be used locally and on site. And the way they did it was really creative. They created a separate group that invested in all of these and installed it and bought it and took the tax breaks. And then they sold the output of it to Northport, the actual township, through a power purchase agreement for some 20 years. And so they were able to get this renewable energy installed at a very discounted rate because of the tax breaks and other things. And then the township of Northport actually saved money on it by buying the output of power that was created in their community. And again, when we look at projects, we love huge solar fields down in Isabella County, but we really love local stuff built by local hands and local folks and used to train local students who are doing local wonderful work, and where as much of that local benefit stays local as possible. And so you'll hear the word local a lot, and that's totally on purpose because we find when that happens, a lot of times these projects go faster. In 2014 and 15, Northport Energy Action Task Force worked with the golf course up here and became the first solar-powered golf course in Michigan, one of the first 5 in the entire country. And it does everything from recharge the batteries on the electric golf carts to power the clubhouse to powering the irrigation system that's here too. And it's not in it, but over the course of a year, they are 100% renewable. They're putting out as much as they're using, which is just wonderful, and became this wonderful showplace for a lot of things we've done since. In 2016, we engaged some students at the University of Michigan. The idea was, how do we make Northport 100% renewable? Sort of a pipe dream in some people's eyes. And so, well, let's put some real brains and numbers behind it and do a feasibility study. So a group of 5 graduate students at U of M mapped out the peninsula, saw where the wind was, saw where the solar was, and calculated that, this would actually be a good investment and would pay back over time and would bring benefits to the region. In 2017, this group decided to take on EV charging stations. And again, because it is so local, convinced the local government to put in a free EV charging station, which was the first on the peninsula. And as a wonderful showcase, they put up educational signs. So it was much an educational model as it was anything else. And then in 2019, Joe DeForest came on board as the president. And the thought was, we've done a lot for Northport, but we could really be expanding throughout the county. And as many of you know, county politics and relationships and skirmishes things are getting tough in some ways in local rural areas. But a project like this and a group like this that says, hey, we want to generate as much local value as possible, really seemed to have a place and a role. And so we thought, well, this group is really focused in Northport, but what about Sutton's Bay and Glen Arbor and Empire and all these wonderful places? Let's expand this and really look at this as a county and hopefully create something of a rural county model of how to get along, come together, and create projects that benefit the community. And so for a year or two, Joe and others of us have been really building the capacity to do that. One of the things we found out quickly is we didn't know much about those other regions. Sutton's Bay wants and needs different things and has a different makeup than Northport did. And so we thought, well, we'd like to help, but how do we help? We can't go in and say, you all should go solar. Well, we could, but we thought what might be more effective was to sort of reach out to every little community around Leelanau and say, what do you need from us? What could we do to help those of you who are already trying to get down this path? And that was sort of the spark and the seed for Energize Leelanau Challenge. So the challenge, very briefly, the goal is to get people in groups of all kinds to be more aware of energy efficiency measures and to spread the use of clean renewable energy across the peninsula. And what we came up with was a competition, a sort of a challenge where we asked folks, bring us your best and the most people, and we can help with them. There's some ways in which Leelanau Energy has sort of turned into a little Rocky Mountain Institute consulting group. So we really can give advice and matchmake. But one thing we found was that when folks are looking to do these energy projects, a little bit of money sure does go a long way. And before coming to Leelanau Energy, I had worked at Groundwork on these two campaigns. One was called Groundwork Shines, and we rolled it out around Leelanau County. And the idea was there were a lot of great local installers, but not all of them had the capacity to do their own marketing at a really high level, or PR, or customer service, or get out to do assessments. So we thought we got a grant from the Mott Foundation to try to sort of be that arm. And it worked well in getting the word out. There were probably 150 homes that responded and were very excited about this. But we found out pretty quickly that a lot of people ran into that hurdle of funding and the upfront cost and said, we'd love to, but we can't. We moved on next to something called SOLARIZE, which was a crowdfunding platform. And we said, okay, instead of appealing to the masses, we're going to find some very specific projects with some groundwork already going on with them that want to happen, and we're going to try to help raise funds for them. And the project was a big success. We got 4 projects funded. One was a solar array at Glen Lake School. One was a solar array at Westwoods. One was a Habitat for Humanity house, which we just loved in Kingsley, where the folks moving in had a very small energy footprint because of some great design up front. And then we helped raise the money for panels so that they never had electric bills. So here's this Habitat for Humanity home and family. It's put in the sweat equity to get the place, but how do they stay in it long term? Well, this is one way to help, was with the utility bills. And it really changed things. It was a wonderful way to think about it. And we were very excited about that one. And then I just mentioned this because I've seen recent updates, and I know Missy Stultz in Ann Arbor well, and they're just killing it down there. I don't know how many of you all have seen this, but 430 homes approaching 3 megawatts worth of solar. And so they really doubled down on this SOLARIZE concept, just of getting the word out and signing folks up. And they threw in the added bonus of, if a lot of us go in together, we're going to work with the installers to bring the price down. So your cost for this might be 20, 30% less because so many of us are doing it together. It's really sort of a brilliant way to do it. But all of those lessons taken together sort of showed us, well, one of the biggest hurdles, probably the biggest hurdle we find to anyone thinking of going solar or doing an efficiency project, is the funding, that it's just not there. But if you give just a little bit, it can help jump over that first hurdle. And so Joe, the president of our board, went out and made 3 big asks for $10,000. Been a hero and a champion of this forever. And Bob said, I love this idea. I would put $10,000 towards finding great projects, energy projects in Leelanau. And he said, and I'll do you one better. I'm willing to do this for 2 years. So you guys can have $10,000 each year for the next 2 years so that you get some momentum going. Joe next approached Rotary Charities out of Traverse, which if you all don't know them, it's the most effective Rotary that I've ever seen. They do amazing work. They really think of systems change, so they're investing in multiple groups that can come together and change entire systems. And they gave us a small initial capacity grant of $10,000 for funding. And then the Leelanau Township Community Foundation was the third ask. And community foundations are these wonderful places to go for a couple reasons. Oftentimes, many of them have funds that they can just give out a lot more easily than some of the larger foundations. In addition, many of them are made up of smaller family foundations, and any one of those family foundations can see a proposal roll through and say, I'd like to put some money into that. And so I just put these up here because we have a business, we have a Rotary Club, and we have a local community foundation that all said yes to $10,000 for prize money for projects that need a little bit of oomph to get going. And then Leelanau Energy itself every year raises money and spends very little, at least we have in the past. And that's led to a surplus each year, which we put into a project fund. And that project fund has now grown to over $10,000. So between the 4 of those, we have about $40,000 now that we can give away to wonderful projects that apply for it. And that can be everything from $250 from a student group that wants to put up posters to start lobbying their school so they'll go solar, to a $15,000 award for a affordable housing project that needs 40,000 worth of solar, and this will get them a chunk of the way there. And then finally, in order to really make this work, we needed some staffing, which was me, and we found a very generous donor down in Empire who also put up $10,000 and said, I want to see this happen, let's make it happen. And so happy to say we're 4 for 4, which I think means this idea has some legs to it. And I think once a community starts getting behind it, it really works. So the way we designed the competition, and this, the donor that paid for the staffing time was resistant at first. And he said, you know, I hate the word challenge. It feels like us versus them. It feels like a competition with a couple of winners and a bunch of folks that walk away empty-handed. He said, I don't love that. And I think this should be a challenge to bring the county together to do wonderful things. And we said, yes, that's exactly what we're thinking, but let's be very specific. Projects that do the most good for the most people who most need it. And so how widespread is the benefit? So these are the official scoring criteria when we're looking over all these applications. The first 2, and this is important to note, it's not just new installed renewables, it's also energy efficiency or energy conservation projects. And that's, I think, huge. I think often those aren't nearly as sexy as the big new panels on a building, but they're much cheaper oftentimes, they're much easier to do, and they make it so that you don't need quite as many of those big expensive panels that might go on your roof. And so either folks working on either kinds of projects are welcome to apply. We've had people looking at geothermal, hydro, deep efficiency on a multi-housing unit, and all of those are beautiful applicants. We sort of feel like the more the merrier. Mm-hmm. Next criteria is impacting the greatest number of individuals. You know, there could be, this is open to anyone. I'll say that, that's important to note. Originally, it was just nonprofits. But Bob Sutherland from Chair Republic said, look, you guys are sort of missing some things here. You know, businesses can take tax breaks. Businesses can make that money go further. Why don't you open this up to everyone? And then, you know, if nonprofits are the ones where it seems like the money's best being used, wonderful. But let's get every project that wants to go out in the open so we can be looking at them. And so that's where this impacting the greatest number of individuals, we're really looking for projects that aren't just a landowner and a developer and an installer who benefit, it's really the community. The other is to provide lasting or long-term benefits to the individuals in the community, which is really important to us. That Northport project that's now providing 20 years of energy and is saving the township money, that's a beautiful concept, much better than a quick fix somewhere else. The next one is featuring a realistic and achievable project plan. Again, there's the students who just need money for a little marketing campaign, which we'd be happy to fund. But for the larger projects, we don't want to be putting money into something that's never going to happen. You know, give $5,000 for a project that almost made it but didn't. And so sort of shovel ready, realistic and achievable. Once we get applicants, we call them, talk to them, and we really look for projects that have some momentum, are moving a little bit, and seem like they have a plan to get off the finish line. We really want to get steel in the ground or projects to happen one way or another. And then these last two are probably the most important, extra credit given for locally raised project funding. So again, we've got 40,000 in local funding, but I think if they've found other funding from their church group or the school, you know, Bob Sutherland was big on this. When we used to ask him for money for solar on schools, he would say, I won't give you 10,000, I'll give you 2,000 so that we can find 4 other. So locally raised project funding is huge for us. And then really key, extra credit for projects benefiting low-income households and communities. You know, the biggest dream would be for as much of this money as possible to go directly towards those that really need it. Solar on a wonderful, shiny, big business is fantastic, but solar in a Habitat for Humanity house sure felt a lot better, I'll say, when we did it. So what we do is sort of your traditional marketing and PR. We've been at it for a couple months now. We put the word out that there's funding and folks should come get it. I think that's worked much better than you should go solar. There's money to go solar, who wants it? Suddenly nobody can say no to that. And so we've paid for local print ads with a pretty limited budget. We have a Facebook page where we're advertising this and boosting a couple posts, paying a little bit of money. Joe did the brilliant thing of signing up for every single chamber of commerce in the county. So whereas Leelanau Energy, we're now members of Empire's, Sutton's Bay's, Glen Arbor's, which means we've gotten to put out the word in every publication and every newsletter, and that all these businesses are seeing it and getting the word out. Township governments are also able to apply for this funding. And when I was at Groundwork, we worked a lot with cities trying to commit to 100% goals. And it wasn't that they had a plan to do it right away. It was just, we thought if you can engage the township and get them excited about a project on their own building, suddenly their VP of finance and their facilities person and their commission and their board, they all get on board with a project. And then when there's 7 more proposed in the next couple of years, they're educated on it. They know it's not a pipe dream and they've seen the benefits themselves. And we sort of feel like they become converts in some ways. And then the last 2 groups is something we're going to lean into in the fall. Summer's a bit of all over the place and tourists and everybody running top speed, but churches and schools. When you talk about rural Michigan, those are the places where community gathers and supports one another in a lot of ways. And so through groups like Interfaith Power and Light, downstate, we can access some of those church groups and just through our local contacts. And then schools, we've got solar on Northport and Glen Arbor, and are looking to expand that to lots of other schools. And we can use a little competition there and say, hey, you can't let Glen Lake do that, Sutton's Bay, and not do it yourself. And so it's sort of a fun way to come together to push folks to go solar or do energy efficiency projects. And then finally, and this is sort of larger scale stuff, and I see Ernie Moss on here, always pushing for bigger projects because they have bigger impacts, and farms are a huge way to do this. And boy, do we have a lot of those. Cherry growers, grape growers, apples, it's just all over the place. Solar and other renewable and efficiency projects to help their own businesses. But once you start getting those folks together, you're talking about dozens of acres, if not hundreds of acres and parcels. And same with townships, township governments that own a lot of land. And suddenly you can start thinking bigger about how to bring those folks together, aggregate those projects, and make some real projects of scale go. And this is to that comment from the guy who said, you know, there shouldn't be a competition against one another. We want to see every project that applies be a winner. And it doesn't mean they're going to get funding right out the gate, but the hope is that we can use our expertise and our connections locally to take every person who applies, even if it's just a pipe dream for now, and get them excited and give them some positive reinforcement and find out what that hurdle is. Is it the utility? Is it the township government? Is it a little bit of funding? Whatever it is, and guide them down the right path. And that can be a lot of things. Connecting to energy vendors is a huge one. What I learned at Groundwork was the quicker you find someone who wants to do a project and then connect them to the experts and get out of the way, the better. And so we connect them to CBS Solar and Leelanau Solar and CBS and Harvest and say, okay, here's the folks who really do this, and they can give you a quick, realistic assessment of what the cost is going to be, what it's going to look like, and how it works. Some folks already have that, some need it. Another is something I just mentioned a little, is connecting community members to one another, right? If there are 6 farms that all want to go in together on something, they could do that, and they could benefit from economies of scale. And I think with farmers, that's especially important because a lot of times utilities are super resistant. And one interesting thing about Leelanau is that we have DTE that supplies our gas. We have consumers that supplies electric all along the coasts. We have Cherryland that's more of the interior, the cooperative. And then we have Traverse City Light and Power down in the little southeast Elmwood Township portion. And for those of you who've been up to Traverse, that's where that wind turbine is, just west of the city, where all those 2 to 3 megawatt solar arrays and fields are. But the hope is, you know, if you go to any of these utilities and say, hey, I'm a homeowner and I need your help in going solar and I don't like how much you're paying, they'll say, well, that's great, but we have, you know, 10,000 other customers who like low rates and we can't do that for you. When we start bringing community members together, especially influential local business owners and leaders from churches and townships, that becomes less of a us against them lobbying campaign and more of a how can we do this together kind of an idea. And so that's one of the things we're doing, is matchmaking and saying, hey, you know, Kolensky Farm and Mizio Farm, you two should really be talking because you're right next to each other and you all could go big on solar. One big thing, and this, I don't know how experienced everyone is on this call with funding and the options that are out there, but at least where we are, Traverse City sure doesn't feel rural these days, but according to USDA and our population, it still is. So there's a REAP grant, Rural Energy for America program, that can get you up to 75% of project costs for a loan and up to 50% in a grant, up to a significant dollar value. And USDA is trying to give that money out. They do it twice a year in October and I think it's April, and they are just looking for applicants. I think it's growing now, but there was a time at which they didn't have enough folks to give the money to, which just seems crazy. And so connecting them to USDA. Another is this federal tax break that many of you probably know about, but for going solar for for-profit businesses and individuals, there's still a 26% federal tax credit that you get and 22% starting next year. But that is, you know, a fifth to a quarter of your project cost. For businesses also, there's accelerated depreciation where if you buy the equipment, you can take the value of it and over 5 years, put that into your books as tax advantage. And it's a special provision for solar arrays. And so there's another way to write off that equipment in 5 years and get those benefits. And if you add those 3 up, plus maybe some grant funding up front, you're up to half the cost potentially paid for of the project. And then you bring in, for folks who still can't make the upfront, Michigan Saves Financing. We work with the folks there a lot and love them. There are lots of other local banks and financing operations who will do things. There's also a wonderful mechanism and group called that runs PACE financing, property assessed clean energy financing, where you're essentially borrowing against the value of your property to put the solar in and paying that back over time in a tax on your real estate. And so a lot of folks don't know one or any of those things. And so the matchmaking puts folks together with those resources. And then, like I mentioned briefly, connecting to the folks at the utilities, connecting to local government officials are both incredibly key, because a lot of times that's the hurdle after financing that's found the most. But again, where we are and doing this on a county level, we kind of all know each other. So you can find out where XYZ has coffee on Tuesdays and go bug them for a minute and have a nice conversation about what you're thinking of doing and get their feedback. And so we're finding that really works. And so the idea is not just to fund these projects, it is, and to get publicity for that and to attract more funding with it to keep this going. But it's really to find any project that wants to go, elevate it, connect it to the resources that are out there, and try to get all these projects to move forward. So our plans for the moment are probably had a dozen folks reach out all across the board. There's a wonderful couple that are architects and real estate agents and are trying to build a home that can be a demonstration model for all of their potential clients to look at what a building can do, how it saves money. So that was a great small scale application. There's also a group called Homestretch, a nonprofit up here, trying to build 8 housing units and cut and paste that model in Sutton's Bay and all around. They would like to get some funding for renewable energy for their project so that they can, and they're actually in a spot where there's no gas hookup, so they have to be all electric. So there's a beautiful place to do the renewable work. And so we're trying to get phase 1 to go really well, and we're running it through October. We had discussions of, well, do you just keep this open and people can continue to apply, or do we put a deadline on it? And we're sort of splitting the difference and trying to do both. But we found that deadlines really work, and that someone who's thinking about doing this might apply if it's open-ended, but if there's an October 31st deadline, come October 24th, they're going to be hustling to make sure it's in under the wire. And so we're sticking with that. At the moment, the plan is to go through end of October, getting applicants in the door, November, review those applications, and make our awards by the end of the year. And so that's phase 1. And then plans for the future is to go bigger and better with this. The fact that we were 4 for 4 means the project works well and we ask the right people. It also might mean we could go 10 for 10 or say 8 for 10 and have $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 worth of prize money next year. And that could go bigger. At some point, there could be folks wanting to invest in these projects. As we mentioned, there was the model of a PPA, a power purchase agreement, where somebody else pays for the solar on the roof of a church, say, and then gets paid back over time. Well, if we found folks really interested in that, Cherry Republic has done a couple of them and might be willing to do more, there could be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to go into those projects to make them happen. And then finally, there is a group in Traverse City called Common Grounds that is taking advantage of some really helpful cooperative laws in Michigan that were passed. Michigan has some of the best cooperative laws around, where a group of folks can come in, invest as a cooperative, and get a lot of financial and tax breaks and grants for the work that they're doing to bring the project costs down. So this Common Grounds group is in Traverse, and they're not doing energy, they're doing a building. 15 nonprofits and a whole lot of community investors are coming together to raise $2-3 million to build a building. And it's been much longer and but again, it's trying to bring that community together and get the local value out of it. So check it out if you would. It's the Common Grounds building in Traverse City. But what if there was a way to do that for solar, where there was a cooperative renewable energy and energy efficiency buying group where we could raise 10, 20, $30 million to do much bigger projects. So again, future phases are looking at how do we raise the finances to make as many projects as want to go. And then we're just trying this in our own little county up here, and we love the idea, and we see wonderful models around the state that we're stealing from and borrowing ideas from. But we'd love to see it go the other way too, and particularly if we're successful, see other counties replicate this model. And again, we think counties are wonderful places right now to bring communities together without quite as much back and forth and political drama as we've seen all over the place. If you can do it within your own county and come together, and it's resources for local projects that stay local. A lot of times we think of clean energy and compare it to local food. And local food you pay a little bit more for because it's great and you're buying strawberries from your neighbor and it feels good and it's paying for local jobs. We'd love to see the same stuff happen with energy, but when you go to the utilities, they say we can buy power for 4 cents a kilowatt hour from Iowa Wind or Louisiana Solar, so why would we buy it for more locally? I think if we can prove there's this value of coming together locally and raise some funds to cover part of that difference, maybe we can start moving the utilities a little bit on investing in local projects as well. Aggregating and connecting projects for time and cost savings, I talked a little bit about, but again, if there are 15 projects and it adds up to a megawatt, like they're doing in Arbor, where they have 400 homes that have installed 3 megawatts, they've done that by aggregating these projects and bringing them together. So we'd love to do more of that. And then we've talked a lot about, hey, there's these local benefits, but I don't think we've proved it. Not in a way that an investor or a financial analyst or someone would say, oh, I see that. We're sort of thinking it intuitively, seeing a couple case studies and saying, well, that's probably the case beyond. What we hope to do is gather enough data from this project that we can really sit down with some of the great minds up here and say, look what this community got. Look at the tax revenue. Look at the students educated. Look at the local jobs it created and the local meals eaten at the cheese shop in Leland because of it. And look at the local inspiration and how it drove our tourist economy. And so we're going to try to make a real model out of this and then, take it around the state and be talking to folks about just what the benefits are of doing this. And my assumption and hunch is they'll be huge. And some of them will be hard to put into dollar amounts and maybe don't even need to be. Have been underserved traditionally. We can show some of that value. I think it'll really benefit us. So for all of you, how you can get involved. If you're in Leelanau County and have a crazy harebrained energy project or a really solid one that just needs a little help, bring it to us. Apply, talk to us, and we'd love to talk about what else is going on and whoever's driving that forward, connect them to the resources to make it move faster. If you're not from up here, share this with your Leelanau contacts, please. And maybe that's like every one of your summer friends who are still coming up in August, send them up here getting excited about thinking about it. Or if you know folks who live up here and are up here frequently, businesses, farms, etc., help us reach those folks and get them excited about this. And they can fill out, it's a very brief official application. They can also just contact Joe or I by email and chat it up and see if it's a fit and see what we can do to help. Another is set up an Energize challenge for your county. Again, that's a larger jump, but if you have a group like Leelanau Energy, and I don't want to underestimate the importance of this. I don't think this can happen without a real groundswell of consistent support. So just like GLREA has been there for years, evolving, building relationships and trust and growing these projects, Leelanau Energy has done that. So Petoskey has one of those, and that group did a SOLARIZE project recently. If you have a local group, put them to work and maybe ask them to consider running something similar, an Energize challenge like this for their county, and start to do this. And we're available to talk, to help, to set up a conference call or a Zoom at some point once the fall hits and get it going. But we would love to see this expand around counties. And once you start doing that, maybe there are overlaps with counties where you can aggregate and build things. And then finally, and I'm hoping, in the upcoming Q&A, hoping to get lots of knowledge from you all, but please give us your feedback. This is a crazy idea. This won't work because of whatever, you're going about it the wrong way. We'd love to hear all of that and your clean energy success stories. Every time I talk to Missy, I get incredibly inspired. Seeing John Freeman driving forward Royal Oak SOLARIZE program is inspiring. And we want to hear about that because that can fit into what we're doing. We're sort of trying to make this open source information and projects. And so I'm going to pop to the final slide, which has information on how to get in touch with us, and then a link for how to apply. But please be in touch, because we think the larger this sort of hive mind is creating and implementing these projects, the better things go. So I want to chat, please do. If you want to connect around projects specifically, info@leelanauenergy.org. Joe and I share respond to you about the project. If you want to donate or think, I'd love to put $10,000 into a prize fund, or I love the work Leelanau Energy is doing, or I want to know more about Leelanau Energy, that's Joe's business, and I'm busy enough with the challenge right now. So send an email to info and Joe will get back to you about that stuff. And then there's the link for applying, www.leelanauenergy.org/energize-challenge. And it's your name, your contact info, how much the project is total, explain to us what impact you think it will have on the world, why it's a good community-based project, and any more details. And that gives us a beautiful way to know a little more when we contact whoever's applying to really talk to them and see what next steps look like. So that was a lot. I will shut up, but thank you guys all for being here, for listening, and happy to answer any questions or just participate in any wonderful, lively discussions that come out of this. But thank you again, GLRA. Just as a great forum and a great opportunity.
Hey, Dan, thank you for a very interesting presentation. Why don't you stop the screen sharing so we can see the attendees, and then it's open to questions. If you want to ask a question of Dan, you can go down to the reactions and do that, raise your hand, or you could just unmute and just kind of raise your hand this way too. So do we have anybody with the first question? Okay, well, actually, I've got one while people are thinking, because Dan, I think one thing that I was impressed with was the emphasis on connections, because I think that's real important. You're right. I think money always gets people's attention, but what probably will make successful projects is you're connecting people to resources and vendors and with each other to kind of help things. I'm kind of thinking though, and I'd like your reaction to this, that this sort of model could work on a township basis or a city basis too, so it doesn't have to be a county. And I'm wondering too, there's a lot of communities that are either doing SOLARIZE projects now, or maybe have an environmental commission that is working on a climate action plan. So I have a sense that there's a lot of communities that are kind of like, okay, we've done our plan, or we have this goal, or what do we do next? And I think your approach could be attractive to a lot of folks. But what do you think? Township level, city level, it'd kind of work okay too, or?
Yeah, John, absolutely. And I think we thought county because there's one governing body and there's multiple little townships, and we wanted to try to hit a bunch of them at once, but absolutely. And a lot of these community foundations too are centered around a township or a city. And so I think it works at multiple levels. From a very small township or even school or community level, you could find a donor who would want to challenge the schools and would put $10,000 up and challenge the school. And we found that worked really well, all the way up to, there's this wonderful project on the food side called 10 cents a meal, where there's now $10 million written into state funding. And it was something groundwork worked on for a while to put 10 cents per meal towards fresh fruits and local veggies in school lunches. And it was a small pilot that grew, was in a couple schools, then grew. And now the state legislature is funding it to the tune of $10 million. Boy, it'd be great to see an Energize Michigan challenge where every community had something like this if they wanted to apply and be part of it. And so I think it works on all those scales, and no reason not to go small or big. For us, I think it was just counties can be interesting right now. Leelanau County, it's sort of, there's a perspective of wanting very small government, at least, and that's changing a little in Leelanau, but at the moment that's where it's at. And so, it's just not realistic. But a way to move the county is to get all these townships wanting something. And then even if it's a small government county board, they're still servicing their 12 members with something they're specifically being asked for. So we sort of thought of it as a political and an energy solution at the same time. But absolutely, this could be townships, cities, schools, small as you want, big as you want.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think Mary has a question. I think that's a raised hand. Maybe not. Okay. Well, anybody else has a kind of a
I raised my hand.
Oh, okay.
Now, when I'm aware, I'm standing between you all on a gorgeous Thursday evening. So
that's right.
I'm happy to have no questions, but also happy to answer, or to have you all email or drop in chat, and happy to connect later. But thank you all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll give everybody one last chance, and then okay, I don't see any raised hands. You're right. Everybody probably has to go out and do the lawn or just take a walk. And Thank you, Dan. This has been a real interesting presentation, and I think it's a concept that will be very good for a lot of communities. I can see it working in my township, Meridian Township, because we've had an energy group working on projects for quite a while. And I think, we're always kind of looking for ideas that maybe we can kind of put into place. And so this gets my mind working. And I think GLREA too will be interested in kind of working with you because we're working with Ann Arbor on helping other communities do SOLARIZE projects. And with your experience kind of having a broader kind of approach, I think we'll really want to kind of work with you and see if we can, in a coordination with you, kind of maybe do some of that spreading of the news and kind of help some other communities get started if they want to. So
You guys are awesome. Thank you, John.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. And thanks everybody for attending.
Yeah, thank you all.
Enjoy the good evening. Take care.
Bye-bye.